G'day, Ziggy here, author of Money Does Grow on Trees. In today's episode, thank you for joining us, Mr. Blair Vernon, CEO of AMP, the top dog.
Thanks very much for having me.
How have you found it? I mean, because I know you've only been in the role for about 4 months.
Actually, 7 weeks.
7 weeks?
We announced the transition in January, taking over from Lex, but I was lucky enough that Lex had a 10-week transition, so that gave us a lot of opportunity for her to introduce me to everyone, and then I sort of took over formally at the end of March.
Now, I know you. We spoke about you loving skateboarding. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I've been skateboarding for years. I took it back up actually when my kids were little, so 25 years ago, after a bit of a break, and I love it. Don't do so much now that I'm here in Australia. Melbourne actually is a good spot to skateboard.
I see them everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Sydney, not quite so easy. But when I'm back in New Zealand, which is where I'm from originally, obviously, it's a pretty good spot to skateboard.
Now, New Zealand, I've heard the minister's trying to get New Zealand's trying to get some Aussies over there because of recent budgetary changes or announcements of budgetary changes. What's happening in New Zealand?
Yeah, look, New Zealand's, I would describe it as being in a bit of a flat patch. Obviously, we have a business there, which we've actually been operating for as long as we have in Australia almost. We started there just in the 1850s. And it's good business, but the economy there has really been struggling. A couple of things, I think. The wealth management sector is quite different because they only have a voluntary savings rate, and that's kind of one of...
Oh, so they don't have a compulsory one like we have here.
And so, yeah, when you look economically between New Zealand and Australia, one of the amazing things about Australia is this savings rate and therefore the impact on capital markets and investment and so forth. And I think that's a real debate in New Zealand right now. The savings rate's KiwiSaver rate's 3%, going to 3.5%, but it's voluntary. Wow. So you can imagine the difference that has for retirement outcomes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you sort of, did you see yourself becoming, as a young kid, a skateboarder? I imagine you've been skateboarding your whole life. Did you see yourself becoming CEO of a listed public company like AMP?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, my career choice when I was a kid was I wanted to be a builder. I was pretty keen on building stuff, but actually a few rugby injuries meant manual activity as it was then, because you were swinging a hammer, meant I headed off to university with not really much idea of what I was doing other than you just get that bit of paper and then go find a job.
Yeah.
So no, certainly being in this position to lead this storied company was certainly never on the radar.
So how did it feel like when you become CEO, right? Because as a, if I'm talking to my mates around the barbecue and, everyone's got different occupations and, when you do hear CEO, particularly of a publicly listed company, you think, oh, wow, how did it feel for you?
Yeah, I mean, a mix of emotions, actually. Firstly, hugely humbling and special to have the opportunity to lead this company because I fundamentally love the company and I believe in what we do. And so, didn't think starting off in New Zealand that I'd ever have this opportunity. So that's humbling in itself. But I think also trying to make sure that I also remember you're just an ordinary human being. Okay, the CEO title, but I want to make sure that I bring my sense of self to it, which is about keeping it real and being pragmatic.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things when I first met you as well. Is that, and you've got to, having come into the office now, you got to feel for the office, right?
Yeah.
And the culture, that we have. So I really enjoy the fact that hey, we play hard and we work hard, but we also have fun, at the same time. And I sense that you've got a similar thing, going on. Because when I met you, we had a good banter, we had a few laughs. It was great, and I thought, okay, that's great. So obviously, the guy knows what he's doing because not anyone sort of becomes CEO of AMP, and yet he's down to earth and is happy to have a laugh.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't take this stuff too seriously. I mean, the business we're in, the business you're in and we are in is important and serious stuff. Retirement outcomes and the wealth of our clients is a really serious business. But I don't think you want to make it all about that in the workplace, because I think the best most passionate people who turn up are the ones who can still have some fun and some energy and some vibrancy. Because the problem I see is sometimes in this industry, it's a bit dry and boring, and I think one of the things we've got to do is still make it relevant and not overcook it.
Yes.
Because we're competing for attention span for everyday Australians all days, and so we're not going to be there all the time. So we've got to figure that out. And I think part of that is making sure culturally we keep that in mind.
Yeah. What makes a good leader right now, as we sit here in 2026?
It's a really interesting challenge in 2026, I think. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of change going on and disruption. Everyone's talking about AI. I think that's sort of turbocharged, but there's always change going on. I think a leader these days has to be able to lead and gather people up to go forward. And ideally, you don't want to leave people behind. So I've been talking to our team about AI, for instance. I want that to be an inclusive activity. So we're working really hard on getting everyone up to speed and training and engaging so that we can actually take the whole team forward. So I think that's one key thing. I think the other thing is actually for leaders these days, there's so much noise and so much activity. How do you get messages really tight and crisp for your team so they sort of know about the mission and can be really focused on that?
Yeah. Is there anything around AI, given your exposure? Because I imagine you've had a lot more exposure than I have. But is there anything around AI that worries you?
There is. I think it's a finely balanced thing between loads of opportunity and loads of risk. And they're in equal portions, actually. I've likened it recently to every sort of new announcement almost daily or weekly. It's a bit like watching 7-year-old soccer. Everyone rushes to the new thing, the new LLM or the new whatever. And I don't know if you've ever watched those soccer games, but there's lots of energy and passion, but it's quite tiring.
Yes.
And that's kind of, I think that's how AI is at the moment. And so, any coach or anyone who's tried to coach, kids, teams like that realizes you actually have to bring some structure to it. And so you got to actually have some people on defense and you got to have some people on offense. And I think you got to do both those things with AI. So we've got to get through the sort of, as I say, the 7-year-old scramble and try and take it forward.
But imagine like those 7-year-olds, you'll have people who go, no, I want to do that part of the AI. I don't want to do it over there.
Absolutely. And that's part of the challenge. I mean, there's tremendous opportunity. As we've shared, we see huge potential for our North platform and our ability to help advisors to harness AI for capacity release and to be able to serve more Australians. Equally, we've got a whole bunch of cyber folks back at the office. I was talking to a head of cyber last night, and they're working flat out every day, and this is just a new layer of complexity and change and risk which we've got to manage.
And you will know a fair bit around regulation as well. And when it comes to the internet, if we go back sort of 20 years, regulation was always behind. And I imagine that's where it's at today. It's still sort of, I mean, everyone's trying to work. I was at a roadshow just a few weeks ago, and there was some AI people, and the three of them from different companies just sat there and said, we don't know where AI is going.
No. And I think that makes it hugely difficult for regulators because we all work on the basis that they can figure out the sort of the field of play, which is why I've used that analogy, because ultimately we're actually figuring that out with regulators almost real time because it's coming at us internationally. And so I think it's hugely difficult time for the folks in regulatory bodies as well. And so we've got to work really closely with them. We want to embrace the opportunities, but we've absolutely got to manage the risks.
Yeah. You deal with a lot of advisors. What do you? I mean, advice, that human element. There's nothing that can replace that, because if you think of AI obviously can be very certain, very detailed. But it doesn't have conviction. It doesn't have emotions. There's a lot of that can't be replaced.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing. One of the great things about this new job is I get to spend more time with advisors. My previous role as CFO, I think I said to you, I wasn't CFO by trade, so getting out of doing debits and credits is probably a good thing. But in the conversation I've been having with advisors, what I've been really saying is the embrace of AI is actually a fantastic opportunity because we're quite unique in this market. We know we've got a shortage of advisors across Australia and an almost open-ended demand, in terms of needing quality advice. To your point, I think the AI tools will help with some of the legwork and some of the mechanics, which is fine, because that's actually, I don't think, the thing that really excites advisors. What excites advisors is being able to...
We hate it.
And so, but the thing I think is the most special is when advisors are in front of clients and that nuanced conversation and that real sense of not just the numbers, but actually the holistic view. That's when the magic comes together. And so the ability for advisors to be able to spend more time doing that and less time doing the admin stuff, I think is tremendous. And I think the thing that's interesting about AI right now is it's really challenging, I think, trust. So, we already know there's people who don't answer their phone because there's so many scam calls.
Yeah.
Now the question is, with AI, are you even going to be able to be on a video call and be confident? So, I think it's full circle moment for advisors, that value like we're having today, an in-person, face-to-face interaction, which is ultimately the really special experience of an advisor and client relationship, I think goes full circle and becomes even more valuable.
Yes, yeah. So it's a bit like when the banks years ago started to close the branches, and then there was this uproar because people were still using blanks and the branches, and they brought them back. Obviously, it's changed a bit since then, but there was this real flow. So a lot of people raced towards technology, only to then realise, hey, I still need someone to guide me, give me, advice.
Yep.
Let's talk about in terms of the industry. You mentioned that we've lost a lot of advisors. The industry has it's raised the standard, raised the bar. There's a lot of clients that I come across. One of the questions that I do ask, because I want to know, is, have you ever had a financial plan before?
Yeah.
And I reckon it'd be 1 out of 10, maybe even 1 out of 20 that have never had a financial plan before, and maybe have never actually had any exposure to a financial planner.
Yep.
I mean, have you found something similar hearing out in the market? Yep.
Absolutely. And it's a real challenge, isn't it? Because that shortage in advisors and advice availability isn't going to change anytime soon, we don't think. There'll be I think we can build some more tools for simple help, but ultimately that interaction with an advisor is critical. And as you would well know, if that's left too late, the one thing you can't do on behalf of a client is catch up time.
Yes.
It's very hard. And so being able to get the awareness of the value and importance of advice and how critical that can be as early as possible is really a fundamental mission I think we've all got to be on.
Yep.
Because the power of time is incredible, but you can't make it up.
Yep.
And so I think that's going to be one of the things we've all got to collectively do across the industry.
There was a couple I saw a couple of weeks ago in their early 30s,
Yep.
and already doing a fair bit, right? They've already started planning, and so they've sorted out a financial planner, and here we're having this discussion, and they're very keen. They said, "What else do we do?" I said, "Listen, there's not like you just need to have a pretty sure, consistent strategy. You're 32, 33, like you got time." You don't need to take unnecessary risks.
Correct.
And you're just going to be able to really achieve your goals. So don't do more than you really need to.
And isn't that the magic of it? When if people have got the wisdom to take that professional advice early enough, they don't then need to be on like a permanent homework activity for all their days.
Yes.
Whereas if it's left too late, there's a sense of trying to do lots to catch up, and some of that just can't be caught up. So I think that's one of the amazing things about the advice industry is that capacity to make differences, and that fork in the road earlier is going to be fundamental.
Yeah.
But we know if there's a shortage, that's a challenge. But also if there's a lack of awareness, and I think we've still got to keep working on that.
And our role as advisors is to help clients avoid making mistakes. It's not just the positive side, which is good in terms of investing, this is what you do, but avoid making mistakes, because those mistakes can be really costly, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of them.
Yeah, well, I always say a lot of people think going to advisors is all about getting the best investment strategy, and that's an important part of it. But often when I talk to clients and talk to advisors as well, some of the most impactful moments for them have been in periods of volatility and turmoil, where their biggest job is to help clients not panic and not make a decision that they would not be able to recover from. You know, and so I think that's part of what we've got to get people to understand is the role of advice is much broader than just choosing an investment strategy.
Yeah, and that comes back to the role that emotions play in investing, and so as an advisor, I'm not emotional to their finances. And that doesn't mean I don't care or I don't provide the best advice. But I can look at things objectives, and that just applies to everything in life. I mean, whenever we're emotional with something, we just don't make good decisions.
Absolutely agree. Yep.
All right. So how we're talking about the long term, but everyone's definition of long term is different, because you talk to someone in their 20s and they go, "Oh, long term for me, 35 is too far away." But I find that there's a mixed sort of view out there, or thoughts more so than view, but thoughts out there is. At the moment, we've got a cost of, living crisis.
Yep.
people, the younger people typically are unable or finding it difficult to get into the market. And in some sense, a lot of them are saying, well, it's hopeless. Why would I even try?
Yep.
When it doesn't look like I can get into anything.
Yeah.
And yet they do have the long term to be able to at least do something as small as it is.
Yep.
Not to just completely give up. But there's this real issue out there, because you can have the situation where you can say, well, look, life's too short, might end tomorrow, not going to be able to buy my home, therefore I go out and live it up. But the reality is, statistics show we're going to live to about 84, 85.
Correct.
So we do need to plan for it. Now, you've got white hair like I have, so we've been around for a while. So you've seen some of this go on.
Totally. I mean, I think it is a delicate balance, isn't it? Because you've got all this pressure and an element of sort of negativity, especially at the moment. And I totally understand that there are real challenges, but the backdrop of that is, I always think of context in terms of, yes, there's challenges here, but if we look globally, actually we're still in a pretty lucky spot here. So there is resources available and the opportunity. So let's try and look at the optimistic piece of that to start with. Yes, housing's a challenge, but that's not the only way to invest, is first point. And I think, to your point, there's no need to have that sense of throw in the towel. And if you're a 20-year-old today, actually your expectancy is going to be a lot longer than 84, 85. Yes. So actually there's long horizon. So I think, how do you harness the power of time, because I think that's one of the secret weapons of investing, and make those small steps and take progress. Now, I think the reality is most people in their teenage years or their 20s maybe aren't going to be seeing a professional financial advisor. But there's a bunch of tools out there and data and insights and lots of folks like your podcasts that help people make some of those early decisions and get some of that activity. I think one of the things I worry about is that we haven't got enough intergenerational conversation about finance and money, and so often it's not talked about. And so that's a challenge, because if you're young and you don't get that education from somewhere, you can make some, less than optimal calls early on, and that's quite hard to unwind from.
Yeah, I've always wondered why they never taught some money, skills in school.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. New Zealand's actually just rolling out a program in conjunction with the financial advice community for some financial capability in schools. And so, but we don't seem to have made that progress here. I think it's an interesting one, though. I've often said to people that it sounds easy. You say, oh, we should do that in schools. But actually, I always think of the life of a teacher. That's complex too. There's probably a whole bunch of people, not just this sector, who think it would be really good if the teachers could solve for that.
Yes.
So the curriculum demand for a teacher must be incredible in an environment where they try and deal with kids who are growing up in an incredibly complicated environment. So I kind of don't want to place that order with teachers. I think the home and the home environment is a really critical opportunity, because there's sort of money opportunities and money management opportunities and therefore financial understanding available every day. To what extent do you have a conversation about the price of groceries, or do you go on the shop and understand how that works? I can remember doing that as a kid, and it was like pretty clear. There's some pretty expensive things here, and they're not now, trolley. And so there's lots of opportunities in the home to think about that. How does, I know it sounds old-fashioned, but how do you think about pocket money and how do you earn that and so forth? So that's quite practical. I think that can be maybe as powerful, if not more so, than just saying I want to outsource that to teachers. No, I'm sure there'll be different views, but that's my one.
No, I think you're right. I think at the very least, if some principles, some broader principles can be covered. You don't need to go into any detail, because you're right. The curriculum is full already. These kids need to learn, right? But just some general principles at some point that they at least have an understanding. So when they then hear something further about it, they can build. For sure. They can build on that. And it comes from home like with anything else.
Yeah, and I do think there's a piece at school which is important when you get, because you've got kids who are starting to go into the workforce. And given the uniqueness of our environment where, they're going to end up with a superannuation arrangement or they've got banking facilities, that's when I think you've got to figure out how do you get some of that understanding, because there's a whole bunch of stuff you need to know, particularly as you get into teenage years, that is kind of more sophisticated. And so how do we find that, sort of blend those two things together?
Yep. How do you manage pressure and stress?
Yeah, well,
I know you go skateboarding.
Well, correct.
Well, and you Kiwis are pretty easy going like us Aussies.
Yeah, I agree. I think the key for me, I found a number of years ago, the key is for me focusing on sleep. A lot of people spend a lot of time focusing on exercise, and I want to try and do some more of that. But the sort of superpower that I figured out was breathing and sleep. And if you can get a good night's sleep, there's a whole lot of stuff you can cope with. Yeah. And so I find I've practiced and made sure I can get good quality sleep. And I think there's a lot of science out there that says that's super powerful. There's loads of tools and technology now to help you with that, but that for me is the key. If I can nail my sleep, then everything else is fine.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's one thing that I can do well is sleep.
Yep.
Right. In fact, if I drop, my wife says, "Oh, you fall asleep as soon as you."
Yep.
Yeah, so that's really a blessing because there's some people that just can't.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think that if you're well rested, then
Absolutely.
Most things you're going to be able to deal with. Tell me about sort of balancing work and family and relationships, right? Because that's. I was talking. I had Grant Hackett on one of the podcasts, and we got talking about that. And he said that work-life balance thing that we try. He goes, that's a fallacy. That just never happens. Sometimes it's more family, sometimes it's more work, sometimes it's all over the place. Yeah. What is it for you?
Yeah, look, I'd agree with Grant. I think that the idea that there's some sort of magical balancing act you're doing and you're searching for this equilibrium just doesn't exist. At least it doesn't for me. I think there's just a continuum, and there's different periods and different pressure. Like right now, I'm 7 weeks into this new job. I'm pretty busy, let's face it. And so that's a choice, though. There's some things I'm doing to make some change and so forth. So I'm consciously doing that, but I'm consciously making sure my wife knows that. I'm a little bit lucky. I've got children who are grown up, so they're in their 20s. So it's, we're not sort of doing the full-time parenting thing.
Yes. You don't have to go to take them off to footy practice or anything like that, swimming.
And that key milestone when they've got their own driver's license and they can be doing their own thing is a good one.
They go, we're out.
Exactly.
But you can say that as well. So we're out.
Exactly. I'm no longer the Uber driver. So, we haven't got that pressure. But, we've obviously relocated from New Zealand 3 years ago. So, we're still finding the rhythm of living in Sydney and that pace. And, this is a busy job. So, that's something I think it's a bit like, a client relationship with the advisor. You've got to keep having those conversations and make sure that you're aligned on that. And so that's what we do. And also just be real about the fact there will be those moments where there's some real intensive pressure. Yeah. You just got to have some recovery too.
Yes. Yeah. And a understanding partner is key.
Absolutely.
I'm very fortunate. I have one. You sound like you have one.
Yeah. And I think, but that's a function of partnership conversations and working together, isn't it? And that's when you get the flow.
Yeah. And when you've got peace at home, you can work. You can go hard at work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What sort of things do you do to try and improve yourself? Because you got a sort of high charge position. You're in leadership. You're managing people. You're managing this corporation. You're accountable to the board, to shareholders, et cetera. So how do you continue to build yourself?
Yeah, that growth thing is a tricky one, because how much time do you spend on that versus just sort of doing what I call day to day?
Yeah,
I'm trying to do 2 or 3 things, particularly in this new role. One, on the growth thing is I need to really focus on AI and the disruption and the risks. So I've sort of described that as one of the 3 key strategies for the organisation. I call it sort of everyone getting on the field. There's no room to be on the bleachers, and that includes me. So that's kind of a personal development thing, because I think that's just so disruptive at the moment. So, and trying to turn that also into a leadership conversation with the team to take everyone with us. I'm not a huge reader, so I'm not one of those people who can tell you all the great business books that I've read. I tend to soak the information up by more of conversations. Yes. The conversations you and I have had. Spending time with advisors for me is really important, because that gives me feedback about what's really going on. So, I like that opportunity as a development. And then the other thing that I'm trying to do with the team, and particularly with the executive team that we've built out, is think about our development as individuals and as leaders and as a cohesive team in an environment of lots of change. Because I think team dynamics is really critical, and I think when you're the leader of a team, you still got to remember you're part of that. And so we're doing quite a lot of purposeful work on that in terms of How do we show up? I'm using a coach with the team and with me, because I think teams that are leading businesses have unique challenges, and I think the extent to which you can really get that rhythm going is a real power.
Yeah, because you'd be seeing the disruption in AI at a few different levels. You obviously see it at a personal level when you're dealing with ChatGPT or whatever it is, but also at a higher level that has an impact on a whole corporation, right? And we're starting to hear and see that about positions and people being worried, and I know that when you're a CEO, whilst there might be the impression by outsiders to go, oh, it's just all about the numbers. But I know you've also got a heart, and it's about people, and this is going to impact people. So that leadership part and that culture and dealing with people, that must be a fair bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I've been quite open with the team that I don't intend to be the CEO who stands up and says we're saving this many headcount because of AI, because I'm not actually sure anyone actually quite knows what that true number is. I'm not sure I believe it.
Yeah.
I think AI for us is a tremendous opportunity, because that shortage of advice means we've got a big demand to serve, to help advisors to be able to see more Australians. So I think we're a bit unique in that. But I also want AI to be an inclusive change. So I've said to the team, we want to try and take everyone with us. So we're sort of working double time on the education and the self-help and the self-learning, because we've all got to do it. We're taking all of our leaders off to another half-day session in a few weeks' time to really deep dive on our skills, not only in terms of the actual tech, but how we lead. Because I think there's times in organisational history where you look and they're disruptive. I think the companies that do well are those that can understand the consequences on their workforce and look to take as many of them with them as possible. And so that's the goal we've got.
Yeah. We're talking about advisors now. You have a lot of exposure to advisors than you ever have. We've got, I think, what are we down to? Just under 16,000.
About 14, I think, 14 and a bit. I think,
really?
Yeah.
So it's
practicing,
it's dropped away from its peak when it was at about 26,000.
Yeah.
So we've lost a lot of financial advisors, and that demand has gone up significantly, and that's only going to increase really exponentially as you've got baby boomers that are going to begin to retire, and so I mean that is a problem, and I know the government at the moment are looking at relaxing some of the education things, the education requirements around that. But is that what are you hearing from the advisors on the ground, so to speak?
Yeah, when I talk to advisors, it's really consistent. That shortage of skilled and experienced advisors who they can put in front of clients is real, and they've got demand, because I think there's a number of things going on. Clients are needing advice for longer, because retirement, people have discovered, is super complex, and so the idea of having a professional advisor to help you through that is now, I think, well understood, as opposed to sort of finishing at the end of your work years. So that's a huge chunk of growth. There's more people arriving at midlife and heading into retirement who understand the opportunity cost of not having professional advice. So that's growing, and then advice itself gets more complicated because we've got regulations and rules, but actually there's more demand in terms of the things that advisors are being sought to. So everywhere I look, there's just growth.
Yeah.
I was talking to a couple of advisors the other day, and the challenge for them is, a lot of their clients are sort of at retirement, and one of the challenges they face is, if they've only got new advisors and they're particularly young, is just having clients have a little comfort with sitting down with a 25-year-old who might know all the numbers and so forth, but the challenge is, does the client have confidence that the advisors, got the experience and tenure? And so I think that's one of the challenges we've got in the industry, is you can't make that up overnight, But we've got to be also prepared to commit to how do we onboard those new advisors, because there's lots of talented young people out there who want to enter this industry. So I think that's a piece. I do think there's a return to industry opportunity, and I think there's a bit of that being recognised. As you say, with the education changes, does that give us an opportunity for some advisors who maybe left the industry to come back, or people to now transition into this industry? Because it's such an amazing industry in terms of being able to run a business, deliver great outcomes for clients, and grow a business, and also not necessarily have to be based in just Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, there's amazing advice practices all over the country doing great work. So I think it's quite unique in that respect. So I think we've still got to do some work on that.
Yeah, we're in a very unique position and very sort of looking for a very position that it's an honour to have been in this position.
Yep.
Because I don't think there would be anyone that would know any more about a client across the board, finances, goals and objectives, their tolerance to risk, which is also psychological. Yep. You know the finer details about a client. It's the financial advisor that knows it. And I remember coming in, I was CPA, accountant and tax for many years, and I came into financial planning, and you could do, at that point, you could do 2 weeks with AMP and your financial planner.
Yep.
And I was horrified as an accountant, because here I came out of, an industry that had high compliance into an industry which at the time didn't have a lot.
No.
And now it's gone, it's gone the other way. And I must admit, there was probably about, probably about 3 or 4 years ago where I just had a thought and I go, I don't know if I've had enough. This is really getting on my nerves.
Yep.
Because I remember 20 years ago when I came in, the average age for a financial planner was 55.
Yeah.
So here I am sitting today at the age of 55, and I'm the average, and maybe that average is now higher.
Yep.
So it's really it's really about getting clients to be able to, getting us to connect to clients. Correct. And being on that level, because experience you can't.
No, I mean you can't manufacture that. We can share the insights and learnings, I think, and so that's one of the things we do. That sort of that passing of knowledge and expertise, but you can't make it. Yeah. And so I think that education requirement and unpicking that and figuring out how to work through that with people who are looking to join the industry or maybe rejoin it is really key. I do think this is where AI is an opportunity, though, because as I said before, some of the sort of more mundane or admin-related things that don't necessarily spin the wheels of advisors, I think we've got lots of tools and lots of offerings already in place across the industry that can be harnessed. The extent to which we can do that more so that we can play in the sweet spot of where advisors, I think, are at their best, and where that privilege that you described exists is the conversation and the interaction with clients over years and years to shape outcomes.
Blair, I had done another episode of the podcast. I had the CEO of Payton Foundation, which is a charitable organisation. Mm-hmm. And he's a chartered accountant by background, was a CFO, and wound up as the CEO of this foundation now. And he goes to parts of Africa and Peru and comes across amazing people who get funded, out of orphanages. One was needed a prosthetic leg, and so there was a donor that paid for that. And the question I asked was that, I imagine when Australia we talk about, the Western world we talk about, and we use the word prosperous in the Western world, we'd immediately think of the dollars, right?
Yep.
And that's what we're so and so his explanation was, yes, that's what we immediately think of. But when you go and see some of the smiles on these little African kids, they're just so happy and prosperous. But I imagine, given that how much I know of you now and the discussion that we've had, when you hear the word prosper, what does that conjure up for you?
Yeah, to me, it's important to not have it go straight to a mental image of dollars and cents, because I think that's why, as I said before, while there's clearly some challenges in Australia right now, I totally understand that. When I think about benchmarking where we are relative to the world, that sense of prosperity and well-being is much broader than just dollars and cents. You can walk down to a beach in Sydney and there's virtually no one there, and it's one of the best beaches in the world. You can. I'm going to go and have a wander around Brighton later on today, and that's an amazing experience.
Yes.
So you can go to a sporting game here in Melbourne, and that's an experience. So I think we've got to broaden that view. I think it does link to the journey around financial planning. I think one of the things that advisors do is help clients understand the whole journey, and it's not just about accumulating as many dollars. I had a staff member come to me last week and announce he's retiring, and he's 62. And I wrote a note to the team. That's the definition of success, because he went to his advisor, And he and his partner sat down and they realised, actually, no, we can retire. We can go and actually do the things that we want to do, more charitable work, go travel. And that was an outworking of, a long-term relationship with their advisor. And it was the advisor who kind of had to nudge them to say, no, you can do this. And that's one of the interesting things I think about advice relationships. Sometimes the advisor needs to be able to be that sage perspective in terms of, no, you're okay.
Yeah, do it.
And so, how do you convert that sense of that balance into a life well lived and make the most of it? That's to me why it's so important to cherish these relationships.
Yeah, that's awesome. When I first came into financial planning, one of the directors of the firm that I was at, we dealt a lot with a lot of medicos, a lot of specialists.
Yep.
And he said that one of the specialists that he was dealing with for many years, he said the specialist reached his goal in terms of having a lot of money, and it was time to retire. So in those days, he said, I pulled out the file and I pushed it across the desk, and I said, you don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
You're good to go. And the specialist said to him, what do you mean? He goes, well, you're good to go. Now go and enjoy yourself, retire, and do whatever thing you need to do. And he said, but what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And he said the specialist hadn't developed any hobbies, relationships. I can't remember, but relationships potentially may have been impacted. And so he was someone with lots of money that you would call prosperous, and yet, didn't sounds like it maybe didn't have much else.
Yeah. And I think that for me is one of the things that's changing now in our industry. Is when I talk to advisors, they've got such a broader sort of remit and sense of responsibility in terms of that relationship with clients to make sure that it's a much more realisation of a whole range of things.
Yeah.
Which is why there's greater time involved actually. And so I think that's a fascinating change that's going on.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's as we get to the end of having chat, I'm really enjoying the chat. What's one financial habit that people should adopt?
Yeah, I'm a real fan of being able to just have visibility and be aware. That is the starting point, I think. So, people say I should be spending on this, spending on that. I don't like to prescribe what people should be doing, but my first rule is be aware. People often say to me, Foxtel's expensive, whatever. I say, well, okay, cool. But if you really love sport and that's something that brings you joy, then maybe it's not expensive. If you sign up and you don't use it, well, then it probably is. So being consciously aware of what you're doing with your financial resources that you have and how do you match that to where you're going to feel the most value. And that will be different for every individual. But I always find it surprising how many people I talk to and they're actually just not aware of what they're doing with their money. And so, being prepared to take some time and become aware is cool. And there's lots of tools, obviously, these days with spend analysis and all that sort of stuff. But it's surprising how few people just aren't even taking that first step.
Yeah. You're right. That is important. And people don't know what their living costs are.
No.
They don't know what their expenses. No. And what's the saying? You can't manage what you don't.
Yeah. Well,
it's something.
Well, and when you do the math, a lot of people do end up, spending more than they're earning, and certainly in some periods. So I, always worry about, the speed at which we can originate and onboard credit arrangements, almost faster than anything else. And so that can be an early habit that's really challenging. That's why that, figuring out that financial education in teenage years is and competency is really critical. And it's not that credit's bad. Again, it's not. There's not a right or wrong. There's just a be aware.
Yeah. It's the use of it.
Yeah,
it's the use of it because you'll get if you had asked my dad, he would say borrow. Debt is bad.
Yep.
All debt is bad. So being Greek background, we ethnics and the Europeans, it was all about cash.
Yep.
You buy everything with cash, but it's not. And we know the use of leverage. When done properly. And within a risk management strategy is very effective.
Absolutely.
Very effective. So that awareness is very important. Mate, I've really enjoyed our chat.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on and having the chat.
Appreciate
and telling us more about yourself. And, we spoke about the industry and advisors and clients. And so thank you. And you keep on skateboarding.
Thanks.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, Blair.
Cheers.